Carlos P. Romulo, the Little Giant. One of the most renowned Filipino the world over was Carlos P. Romulo, newspaperman, educator, soldier, diplomat, and statesman. He had been in the service of all Philippine presidents, from Quezon through Osmeña, Rojas, Quirino, Magsaysay, Garcia, Macapagal, and Marcos. At 15, Romulo started his career as a cub reporter of the pre-war Manila Times. At 16, he had his own column, Senate Doings. He was assigned as regular reporter to cover the Senate where Quezon was then president. At 17, he was editor of the rival newspaper, The Cable News. When he enrolled at the University of the Philippines, he was also appointed editor of the school's varsity news. At 19, he was sent as pensionado of the government to the United States. He stayed there for 4 years, observing American politics. After his studies, he was appointed one of the private secretaries of Senate President Quezon. At the same time, he taught at the University of the Philippines. Half a year later, at 23, he became assistant editor of the Herald, a daily controlled by Quezon. He was then handling 3 jobs: university professor, the private secretary to Quezon, and assistant editor of the Herald. Upon Quezon's advice, he concentrated his efforts on the Herald. After a few years, Romulo was able to make the Herald a leading publication with several newspapers and 2 radio stations in a chain called DMHM. When World War II broke out, General MacArthur appointed Romulo as a uniformed member of MacArthur's staff. At Corregidor, upon the order of President Quezon as approved by General MacArthur, Romulo broadcasted the voice of freedom to the beleaguered Filipinos all over the island. The Japanese victory is only temporary, he broadcasted. Do not panic. Do not yield to the enemy. Do not betray us. When the fall of Corregidor was inevitable, MacArthur ordered that Romulo be taken off from Bataan to Australia. Romulo and an American flyer, Lieutenant Roland Barnick, in an amphibian plane made out of the remnants of other damaged planes, managed to fly out of Bataan to Iloilo, then to Australia. They were the last soldiers out of Bataan. With the government of the Philippines in exile, Romulo was attached to President Quezon's staff. Upon Quezon's death, he was made resident commissioner to the United States by President Osmeña. In 1944, after 2 years of silence and upon MacArthur's return to the Philippines, Romulo resumed his Voice of Freedom broadcast. War's End found Romulo back in America with his family. He continued his work as resident commissioner, then he became the chairman of the Philippine delegation to the United Nations. Romulo spoke not only for the Philippines, which was not yet independent at that time, but also of the other troubled nation who also wanted to be free. Romulo became the big voice for the small nation. He wanted the word independence inscribed in the charter, not the word self-governing as desired by the colonial powers like England and France. Romulo won his fight, and his victory signaled the start of the fight for freedom in Asia and the rest of the world. The succeeding years brought added fame to Romulo's successes. He was elected president of the Fourth General Assembly of the United Nations. He, according to the Russian delegates, was a small man with a big voice. As a president of the United Nations Assembly, he looks more like a Boy Scout. Romulo had been engrossed in world diplomacy at an age when most men would have retired on laurels won. Romulo was doing a young man's work. He had a young man's mind attuned to modern, progressive thinking and modern ideas. Questions. Carlos P. Romulo selection. Write the correct answer. Number 1. The first job Romulo held was A. Cub reporter, B. Newspaper boy, C. Newspaper editor, D. Private secretary. Number 2. As a student, he became the editor of A. The Torch, B. Varsity News, C. Manila Times, D. Herald. Number 3. As a reporter, he had a column called A. The Broadcaster, B. Here and There, C. Senate Doings, D. The Herald. Number 4. The first Philippine president that he served, A. Emilio Aguinaldo, B. Manuel Rojas, C. Manuel L. Quezon, D. Sergio Osmeña. 5. A daily controlled by the late President Manuel Quezon, which Romulo served as an assistant editor, was the A. Varsity News, B. Herald, C. Manila Times, D. Cable News. Number 6. He became one of the professor at A. UP, B. UST, C. FEU, D. Ateneo. Number 7. During World War II, Romulo broadcasted the A. Diplomacy at Work, B. Fight for Freedom, C. Senate Doings, D. Voice of Freedom. Number 8. During World War II, he stayed in A. The United States, B. Australia, C. Philippines, and D. UN office. Number 9. Romulo became engrossed in A. Debates, B. Boy Scout activities, C. World diplomacy, D. World wars. Number 10. It was said that he has a big voice, which meant A. He talked loud, B. He was always shouting, C. As a broadcaster, many people heard him, D. What he used to say was being listened to by the dignitaries.